So today we're driving the first generation Tesla Model 3 Performance. Before we get out on the road, let's check out this exterior. We're going to pop the frunk while we're here. So before we get into that frunk, let's look at this midnight silver metallic color. Of course, this was an option on the Tesla Model 3. You couldn't get that standard. The only standard color at the time for Teslas was white. Side profile of this thing looks pretty good. We have these Uber turbine wheels, which are quite awesome, especially with these meaty brake calipers and just overall performance brakes. Red painted calipers, and they say Tesla on them. So in the front here we have a small frunk. It has the ability to have one carry-on stored in here. Not really much else. I mean, it doesn't have a draining floor like my frunk in my Mach-E, so not really much else to say, and that's also where you have your windshield washer fluid refill. The trunk opens up on its own thanks to a button on the infotainment screen. Of course, not the largest trunk, but it is fairly doable, and honestly, it competes with a lot of sedans in the market for a sizable trunk. And those seats do fold down, getting you access to the cabin, and there's a high floor too, so you can fit a ladder, maybe even multiple ladders, no problem. We do have our standard, 110 charger here that plugs right into your outlet. And then beneath here is just some added space along with the pack that goes with that charger. And then the button here will automatically close your trunk. Watch your head when you step away. And we have some dual motor badging right there, which indicates this is an all-wheel drive model here. The 0 to 60 quoted at 3.1 seconds. Let's get out on the road and test that out. But before we do, Auto Joe, let's go check out these back seats. So sitting behind myself, I'm 5'9", and I have ample amounts of legroom. The one concern is my amount of headroom. If you're any taller than me, you're gonna have to crouch your head. I have an inch above me in headroom with this giant glass roof, which is pretty cool. Doesn't open at all, but does provide a lot of light into the cabin. So the one thing that's been nagging me since I've been driving this Model 3 is I only have the physical key, which is just a little credit card. I don't have the phone as a key setup because it's not my car. So I have to tap down here, which is no problem, but it makes me do it every time I get in the car, making it so I can't leave my key in my pocket. So it was kind of hard finding horsepower and torque numbers for this Model 3 Performance. And of course, everyone's wanting to know those numbers because it's a performance model with an 82 kilowatt hour battery pack, all-wheel drive, dual motor setup. So what is it, may you ask? It's quoted at 500 horsepower, 489 pound-feet of torque. We don't have launch control in here, but I mean, rest assured, if you slam that accelerator pedal, you're gonna get moving. 0 to 60 time quoted at 3.1 seconds, which I said earlier. Quite a lot faster than my Mach-E. We do also have some customizability for our drive modes. We have 3 settings for our steering, which makes it either, heavier or lighter depending on your preferences, as well as 2 modes for acceleration. We have chill and sport. The range quoted for this Model 3 is 315 miles. I'd be curious if you are a Model 3 Performance owner, have you gotten anywhere near that? Definitely leave that in the comments below. The one gripe I hear about Teslas is they overrate their mileage a little bit, and I think that is the case here. But I could be wrong, who knows, right? So if you aren't familiar with Tesla's UI system, just know for a fact that they don't have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So if that's something you're looking forward to in your next car purchase, you won't get that in a Tesla product. However, they have a fantastic UI system built in here with Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, YouTube Music, Amazon Music. I could go on. They also have their own entertainment things such as, games and and even karaoke you could play in this car. I mean, they call it karaoke. Super funny, right? Tesla also has the best camera system in the game. We have a side view camera going on when I put on my directional here. Very crystal clear resolution. I don't know how anyone could possibly merge into another person with one of these cars, because you just have unlimited blind spot view. And even down here you have augmented reality, so a car pulled up right next to me and it notified me and also gave me a little chirp when the light turned green. So flooring this thing, you're going to get to 60 quite fast. It is just absolutely thrilling. There's no delay in terms of acceleration. You just get on that pedal and this thing moves. I'd expect if you own one of these, you're going to go through a set of tires so incredibly fast. So one thing I do notice at speed is there's a lot of sound coming in this cabin. These tires are pretty noisy and that really reflects in here, but the most prominent is actually wind noise coming from these window gaps. I mean, we do have frameless windows, so that can attribute to some of that if it's not the tightest fit, but it makes me want to sit here and try to roll up all my windows, which I did, and they're all up, but it sounds like I have one ever so slightly cracked. So we won't be testing out full self-driving. At the time, it was still an option for Teslas, and it wasn't an included software. You had to pay, upwards of $10,000 US for that FSD feature. Of course, they're no longer allowed to call it full self-driving. That was actually termed misleading because it's only a level 2 autonomous system, which we won't get into the legality and everything involved with that. I mean, if you want to look it up, you can. Needless to say, we're not going to be testing out Tesla FSD. I have actually used it in the Cybertruck, and it's pretty good. The only mistake it made for me personally was when it was parking. It actually parked right in the middle of two open spots, which my girlfriend and I looked at each other and we just laughed. It was like, how'd you get everything right but that? So with the steering on Sport, it's just absolutely in the right setting. I would definitely keep this thing in the tightest possible steering setting. It just feels right, feels direct. You really know where those wheels are pointed. I'd say this is the best steering I've had in a Tesla product, and I've driven the Model S, which that was just a long range. That wasn't, a performance model or the highest performing one. I'm kind of blanking on the name right now. I've driven the Y, I've driven the Cybertruck, and now this is my first go in the Model 3. As far as visibility, we do have a wide open cabin, a nice greenhouse in here per se. Our A-pillars are pretty small. We do have speakers on them down here and up here. And of course our dash height sits really low, so you get tons and tons of visibility out the front. And I think that's probably my favorite part about this Tesla Model 3. In my Mach-E, even though it's an electric vehicle, we don't really get a lowered dash. We just kind of get more space down here, so there's compromises made on both sides. As far as storage, we do have a cubby here, which opens just like that. And then we also have a regular center console. This pushes back and it goes automatically. So you might ask me, since Tesla doesn't have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, how do you connect your phone, right? You actually just have Bluetooth in here, so you'd connect via that way. And Tesla has a built-in navigation system which you can pop up. And that will also get you things such as your charging network. And I've heard nothing but good things about Tesla's navigation system, so honestly, I won't say anything further. So the Model 3 Performance is the lightest weight EV I've driven in quite some time. Even being below 5,000 pounds for an EV is quite the feat, and this one sits at 4,050. I'm actually genuinely surprised at that curb weight because the battery is not that much smaller than my Mach-E's, with my Mach-E comparing at 91 and this comparing at 84. And although my Mach-E isn't a direct competitor, you could throw the Mach-E GT in there, and this of course is a little faster to 60, but that one is a bit bigger and has more practicality. And honestly, the Mach-E competes more with the Model Y. So what are the competitors for the Tesla Model 3 performance? We have, of course, the i4 M50. I have not driven that car, although I've been inside of one, and frankly, it just seems like you get a lot less space in the interior, especially in terms of the back seats. They're just not really all that usable. Of course, this and that both have the slopey back to kind of get some better aerodynamics, but that one, it just felt a lot more cramped, especially because it only has a small little sunroof. It doesn't have the full glass roof like this one has. So personally, if I were to choose between the two cars, definitely go drive one first. I'm assuming that the BMW, you will see a lot better build quality, especially over time, and we're going to get to that in a second in this Model 3. But yeah, definitely drive them back to back. I will say Tesla has the advantage for the charging network. Basically, between that and any electric vehicle you drive, Tesla is going to win in the supercharger network, just because they've been set up over years and years and years, and they've put tons and tons of money and invested tons of time into making sure you could travel across the country in your Tesla with no problems. Alright, so we're approaching the worst road in Merrimack, New Hampshire. Let's see how this thing performs at 20 miles an hour. Kind of hard to get there with the regen. So actually not as stiff and hard and abusive as I thought the ride was going to be over those harsh bumps. I will say the car rocked back and forth a bit, and that is just due to that stiff suspension setup and the lack of travel due to this one sitting a little lower than the regular Model 3s. Honestly, I still would drive this thing daily to Boston, where the roads are really horrible, just because of how fast and agile this thing is. You could probably avoid some of those potholes no problem, but I would also be kind of worried with these 20-inch Uber turbine wheels. While we're stopped, let's put this thing in reverse. As you can see here, we have a pretty high quality backup camera. The one thing I don't like that Tesla doesn't do is that they don't have like a 360 bird's eye camera view. They just have augmented reality, which there are cases where I prefer the camera over the augmented reality, and that's just my personal take. Some people might not have a problem with it. So let's talk about build quality and wear and tear. I will say that there are some creaks and rattles in here. Primarily with this driver's seat, if I just wiggle myself in this seat, you might be able to hear it, might not. It wiggles and creaks and rattles, and honestly, it just has been driving me a little crazy. It's like if you were to have this car and daily it, you'd have to have your music up pretty loud to kind of tune it and drown out that little bit of a creak in the seat. And maybe it's just because I have my seat positioned a little far back, so it has a little more friction with, you know, the setting of this infotainment console. But honestly, there's not really much of an excuse. I've never really had a problem with the seat doing this, even in some of the lower price point cars I've driven. Other than that, there's not really any super big wear and tear items. I mean, the paint and the wheels, they look fantastic in this Model 3. Everything is held up mostly, you know, over the course of time. Of course, this interior is of really nice quality too. I definitely like the button upgrades that Tesla did. I just got out of that 2020 Tesla Model Y a few weeks ago, and the plastic buttons they had here on the steering wheel were not good. And I don't really like these steering wheel buttons. I don't like that you kind of have to play around with, you know, the infotainment. See, I just wanted to press a button as an example, but I don't like how you have to play in the infotainment screen with these buttons to adjust things such as the position of the steering wheel, when that should just kind of be a button down here on the column. But honestly, if you were to drive this car on a daily basis, you'd get used to those things and used to the functionalities of Tesla, just like you do your iPhone or whatever phone you have. You get used to that. As far as a value proposition, I'm just so impressed with what you get in a car for under $30,000. Of course, this one's even under $25,000. And this Tesla Model 3 Performance, with having just above 50,000 miles on it, that's just absolutely nothing for 500 horsepower and 489 pound-feet of torque. And you also get this lovely interior. Of course, you're going to have to deal with the creak in this seat. I'm sure it's just, some sort of bolt you have to tighten, maybe bring it back to Tesla and have them take a look. I'm sure it's something they could definitely fix for a cheap cost too, honestly. But with that being said, you do have tons of nice materials throughout the cabin. I really do like the wood material on this dashboard. It's very simplistic and a nice overall design. I will say I like my Mach-E infotainment screen a bit better. It's just easier to navigate things such as changing the temperatures and whatnot. But I think you would get used to how this car operates over time. I will say that this screen, just popping things up, it's really high resolution. It acts really quickly. It's incredibly responsive. That refresh rate in that screen must be quite a bit higher than my Mach-E's, and whatever they use for processing power in here, it's almost like a gaming computer. I can't believe how well this screen operates. All right, let's give it one last go, shall we? This car just has hold onto your pants acceleration. I just can't believe how fast these things are. And when you let off the gas and you let off the accelerator pedal and regen kicks in, that speed comes down quickly as well. The brakes are also quite good in this Model 3. I will say that there isn't a switch off with the regen and the braking. They just kind of act as separate components. Some of the EVs, you'll have this switch off moment where you'll touch the brake pedal lightly to begin with and regen will kick in. And then if you press it a little harder, that's when the actual braking kicks in. That doesn't happen in this car, and that's actually a good thing, because a lot of those systems can be weird and kind of give you this inconsistent braking feel that you don't want to have to deal with. So with that being said, ergonomics are great in this Model 3 Performance. Speed and performance are there. This thing is actually quite fun and thrilling to drive. And for the most part, builds, quality, and materials in here aren't too shabby as well. I will say the seat creaking is definitely the worst and most prominent thing as far as build quality goes for this Tesla Model 3 Performance, but it's something you can deal with, and it's something I'm sure you could fix. With that being said, please leave your comments and your questions below. I always like to hear from you guys, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thank you all. Bye-bye.